Want language learning to feel simple and actually work? Well, reading unlocked language learning for me faster than any other method, even after years of struggling with different apps and textbooks. So in this video, I'll walk you through why it's so effective, how you can use it for real results, and why some of the normal advice you hear is just plain wrong. There's an experience I had that clearly shows how powerful reading can be, especially for naturally picking up vocabulary. I was chatting with an online tutor about exercise and different Olympic sports. Now, I said something along the lines of escriba así ese deporte donde se lanzan estocadas para ganar puntos, ¿no? The interesting thing is that one of the words I used, estocada, which basically means to thrust with a sword, was a word I'd actually never heard or spoken before. But in the series of books I've been reading, people were always thrusting at each other with swords. So when I naturally used it in conversation, I just surprised myself. Now, here's the thing. That stood out to me clearly because estocada isn't a word that you'd normally hear in everyday conversations or podcasts. So I know that it came from reading. But it got me thinking, how many other words am I using regularly that I've picked up or at least reinforced through reading without even realizing it? And that's just vocabulary acquisition. Reading is incredibly powerful in other ways too. It improves all aspects of your language skills because it's helping you to build that mental network of the language in your brain, making everything easier to remember and use naturally. Every word and phrase you see whilst reading comes with context. And context is key when linking it to the rest of the language that you've got in your head. And of course, it's going to reinforce grammatical structures and patterns, all of that kind of stuff, which are going to help you when it comes to speaking and writing as well. And the best part is, you're absorbing all of this without having to consciously study. We'll look at specific ways you can do this effectively depending on your current level in a minute. But first, there's something else you should know about what's happening inside your head when you read. When most people read, they hear a voice inside their head. That is called subvocalization, and that's normal for the majority of people, and it helps with comprehension. But subvocalization has some real implications for us as language learners. The biggest one is pronunciation. If you don't have a strong grasp of how the language actually sounds, and then you dive straight into tons and tons of reading, you risk reinforcing awkward pronunciation. So even if you're not a big reader yet, it's still a good idea to spend plenty of time listening to the language at first. So that way, when you do start reading, that voice inside your head is much closer to that of a native speaker. And I know some people are fans of reading and listening to the audio at the same time to try and get around this problem, which is definitely one way you can approach it. And we'll look at some tools that you can use to do that shortly. But for most of us, that's not always that practical. When I'm reading, it's usually for pleasure. And so I don't always want to deal with some audio. Still, it is a useful option if you enjoy it, or if you're newer to language learning and want to hear the sounds as they're written on the page. Either way, it's still important to be aware of before you get carried away. It's also worth mentioning that subvocalization affects your reading speed. Now, most people read at the same speed they speak. So although speed reading exists, which is where you don't have that internal voice, and so you can read much faster, generally, the faster you read, the lower your comprehension and retention. So you're better off just relaxing and enjoying what you're reading. There is no rush. Oh, by the way, if you want some more weekly language learning tips from me, I send out a newsletter every week, so you can check out the link in the description if you're interested. Now, let's debunk some common myths around reading and see exactly how you can apply all of this to your own language learning. Before we dive in, if you're serious about using reading to finally master a language, the Story Learning sale is on right now. So they've got 15 languages, all now half price. It's based on reading and listening to a story in order to pick up the language. I started Spanish with their Spanish Uncovered course, so I know it works. Check out the link below or the code on screen to grab yours. This is one of only 2 times a year they offer these prices, and the sale ends soon. In the last 6 months, I've read these 12 books in Spanish. And having put a fair few hours in, it's made me realise that some of the common advice about reading might actually be holding you back. So let me explain. There's a classic distinction between intensive and extensive reading. And like all of these things, it depends on who you ask for the exact numbers for each. But generally speaking, Intensive reading means you understand at least 80 to 85% of the words, ideally a bit more, but essentially you're regularly stopping to look things up. Extensive reading means you understand 95 to 98% of the words, making reading smoother and guessing unknown words so much easier. The common advice is always read content where you understand 98% of the words. But there's a big problem there. How exactly do you find content at exactly 98% comprehension? And even if you do, what if it's really boring? That's why I think focusing too much on percentages just isn't helpful, especially now we have technology to make it easier. Instead, here's my advice. Read for pleasure. Forget about percentages. Now, I'm not criticizing graded readers. I've read plenty myself, but honestly, many are just pretty boring. So as soon as you can, move on to content you genuinely enjoy, even if it's initially tough. Personally, I found a library of nerdy sci-fi books online. And when I first started reading on my iPad, I'd read a paragraph in Spanish, translate it quickly to English, and then read the Spanish again. And I'd do that all the way through the entire book. Technically, this looked like intensive reading. But here's the thing. Because I enjoyed the story so much, I just kept going, book after book. And then one day I realized something amazing. I was translating less and less. My comprehension had improved dramatically, almost without me noticing. Soon, I moved on to paper books. Do I understand every single word? Of course not, but can I still read for pleasure? Definitely. And if I need help, I can just use the camera function in Google Translate. It takes less than 10 seconds and then I am right back to the story. So yes, graded readers can help at first, but don't stay there too long. As soon as possible, switch to something you genuinely enjoy. Now, I do appreciate you do need to get to that point and it might be harder at first, but you'll stay motivated and you'll persist longer and you'll learn faster because you'll want to put more hours in, or at least that's what I found. Now, audiobooks, they are not exactly the same, but they do share many of the same benefits. You can re-listen repeatedly, picking up more each time, and just like reading, all the words and phrases come with context. And even without the ability to look up words, the context will help. Just today, I was listening to Lord of the Rings in Spanish, and I heard a character pour a cup of hidromel. I thought, hidro, like hydro, so like water, and then meal is honey. I was like, mead. If you know what that is, it's an old-fashioned drink made from honey, if you haven't heard of it. It's not a common word that I'll need, but it does just show you'll pick up words without needing to look them up. And further to new words, you're picking up native pronunciation, which is a massive bonus. So don't discount audiobooks, especially as you can then go on to read the book to reinforce it all again. So, what is the best way to read to easily improve your language skills? The secret to successful language learning is simple. Make it enjoyable, because the more you enjoy it, the more you're going to want to keep going. That makes consistency easy, and before you know it, your language skills will just grow naturally. Honestly, I often find myself making extra time to read when I should probably be doing chores or other non-language related things, simply because I enjoy it. So here's the number one rule. Don't read anything you don't enjoy. I've started plenty of books, especially graded readers, authors, that I've quickly put down. I'm not saying you shouldn't challenge yourself or try to understand new things. You are learning a language after all, but life is short. If something feels like a waste of your time, just ditch it. The nerdy sci-fi series that I'm reading isn't exactly highbrow literature, but who cares? I often go to bed early just to do more reading, and I love that feeling of satisfaction just getting through a book that I liked. So here are the key tools I recommend to make reading easier and more enjoyable. If you're newer to the language or you find the content harder, read on a tablet or screen. You can highlight sentences and quickly translate whatever you don't understand. Don't analyze every word. If you're following the plot or the information, that's enough. Just keep going. If you're using paper books, which is always nicer, use the camera on Google Translate. Like I said, it takes less than 10 seconds and you're instantly back into the story. There are, of course, loads of online reading platforms like Language Reactor and Link there are plenty of others out there these days. The good thing about these is not only can you quickly look up words or sentences, but most will be able to play the audio as well. So you can listen along to what you're reading either at the same time or listen later whilst you're commuting or doing some other chores. And of course, if you're learning a language like Chinese, it is harder. I'd say stick to reading on a digital device and find sites that offer graded reading material. So for Chinese learners, there is the Chairman's Bow and Do Chinese. I like reading on Pleco because it's just no frills, and lots of the stories on there you can buy the paper version of as well. So you can read it digitally and then test yourself with the paper version later if you want. What I would say is where reading is harder in some languages, build up slowly for consistency rather than reading stuff that is way too hard and giving up in a week. And whilst we're talking about using tech to read, here is something you can try. Take a photo or a screenshot of a difficult page of something you're interested in reading. Then upload it to ChatGPT or your favorite AI and ask it to rewrite the page at your level. Suddenly you can start to unlock more content quicker. But what if you want to take it to the next level to improve? How can you try and use reading to improve your speaking, for example? Remember, reading isn't the only way to build your skills, although it's incredibly valuable, especially long term. But if you want to take it one step further, here is a little trick that I find incredibly useful. I'm going to struggle to convince a tutor to read the sci-fi series I like, just so that we can talk about it in a lesson. But talking about what you've read does help to push your language skills, even if it's still fairly basic first of all. So there are two easy ways to do this. The first is to chat with an AI. It's always happy to discuss character motives or plot twists or just whatever interests you. And if the story is well known enough, it will also know it. And so you'll be able to debate whether a character was justified in doing something, for example. The other way is to join online communities. So depending on your genre or series, there might be Discord servers or groups where you can practice speaking about books that you enjoy. And for both of these approaches, if you prefer, you can do it in writing rather than speaking. And if it's with an AI, it can give you direct feedback too to help you improve, to try and improve your accuracy. Whatever you do, the goal is simple. Get hooked on reading, because once you're genuinely enjoying it, language learning becomes effortless and almost automatic. So if you want to start to build your reading habit, the Story Learning sale won't last long. If you're interested, you can get the courses half price using the link below. Now, in learning a language, consistency is key, and central to that is having the right mindset. So this video over here will show you how to build the foundations you need to become a confident, successful language learner.